The year is 1998, and I took my first official contract in IT with zero experience and zero IT education. This is the story. You are listening to the IT Path Podcast. I'm your host, Dana Morrison. Let's go and help you claim your journey into IT. The year is 1998, and I walked into the superintendent's office of a small school in Maine with zero experience, zero IT education, but I did have a lot of ambition and tenacity. I recently heard someone in sales use the acronym CAT. Character, ambition, and talent. Well, in my opinion, talent has to be developed. Yes, you can have raw talent, but skills need to be learned and honed. TheOnlineRocket.com has this quote: "To be tenacious requires one to be exemplary, to want to better him or herself. Granted, ambition does falter and lives become busy, but tenacious people manage to weather the gauntlet of responsibility and take hits as they come." And that's exactly what I did. I weathered the gauntlet. Here's the story. Before we can really dive into 1998 and my first job at a very small school in Maine, we need to go back to 1994 because you need to understand some background of what was going on in my life. So I was trying to take in 1994, I started going through an education path at Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, for actually a theology degree, theology with a concentration in youth ministry. However, being very interested in computers, I wanted to take a comp sci minor. So I got into the minor program and we're newly married, living off campus, and I'm in this minor comp sci, and I have to take a Pascal programming class. Pascal was an old language even at the time, but they had a computer lab that was outfitted, and you could get a license to run Pascal on your home computer through the university. So I had that Pascal programming class, and I also had a pre-calculus class. Now, let me tell you, in high school, I was not very strong in math. So the pre-calc class was pretty challenging. You're in a college level courses now, university, and the curriculum is moving very quickly, and I'm just really having a real struggle trying to keep up. So pre-calc, I end up getting a D. And then in my Pascal programming class, because I was an off-campus student and trying to travel to the lab in the evening in order to be able to use the lab to run and test programs, and I was in the lab when nobody else was really in in my Pascal class was in the lab programming. I couldn't really ask a whole lot of questions. There wasn't a lot of people that understood how to help me with some of the programs I was trying to run. And even though Pascal is a pretty easy language, I got a D. So 2 Ds. When you get Ds in your major or your minor, they put you in the dumb class. I don't know how else to describe it. They put you in a class with a bunch of people to try and level up your study skills and help you improve and make sure that you're taking serious your classes and all of that. So I took these study skill classes, but I said, okay, I think I've had enough of the comp sci for now. And I just prayed. I was like, God, I guess if you don't want me to study computer science right now, I'm going to focus on my theology curriculum, theology degree, and get through that. So that's exactly what I did. I dropped out of comp sci, focused on my other studies, and moved forward. Ended up getting my bachelor's degree later on. So that's 1994. That was the start of my university education. 95, I had that Commodore 64 we talked about in episode 1, but I needed a modern PC. I realized, my desire for computer science, my desire for technology was not going away, and I needed a computer. I needed a computer to help me in my school education as well. People had started bringing laptops to school. I mean, this was the very first, around this time, 1995, was probably really the first time people were bringing laptops to school and to university. So I needed a modern PC. I didn't know what to do. So I asked the kids in my youth group to help me. And they did. They helped me spec out a computer using a Cyrix 33/40 megahertz. This was back when the computers had a turbo button on them to flip the switch from 1 megahertz to another. It's just crazy. The turbo button, I won't call it turbo boost. It was stupid. Why didn't you just always have it on 40 megahertz? It had 40 megahertz and 240 megabyte hard drive. And actually, I was the envy of some of the kids in the youth group because some of them only had like 120 megabyte hard and 8 megabytes of RAM, and some of them only had 4. So huge upgrade, So I paid about $800 for all the parts. And there was a magazine at the time, and it's still around, I believe, Computer Shopper. I grabbed a Computer Shopper magazine and I thumbed through and I found all the parts, and I ordered via the phone. There was no internet as we know it today. These companies might have had websites, but they weren't like we know them today to be able to order and everything online. So remember, I'm a college student. I'm married, a young married couple. Trying to figure all this stuff out, trying to make this stuff work, and spending money on a computer, $800. That was a pretty big deal. So the parts arrive, I unbox them, and I called John from the youth group. I'm like, John, I need your help. But guess what? John's not available. So I called another kid from the youth group, Jason. And Jason was like, no, actually, you probably want to talk to John. He's the guy who kind of knows how to put this stuff together. So, I'm like stuck, and I want to get this computer built. So I kind of klutz my way through the build all by myself. But there's 2 cables that are very confusing. This was called an AT style motherboard, AT style power supply. And they had grooves in them to kind of prevent you from putting some of this stuff in wrong. But the way that the clips were on the motherboard, you could actually get these 2 cables reversed. So I didn't know what to do. So I waited for a while and was hoping that John would call me back, and that didn't happen. So I just plugged it in and turned it on, and immediate smoke. It was off the rails. And now I'm like, oh my goodness, I've spent so much money on this. Have I burned out supply? Have I burned out various components of this computer? So I was pretty worried. So I unplugged it, and I was thinking, well, I guess if I've already got smoke, what can I lose? I'm going to switch those 2 cables around and see what happens. So I switched them around, and sure enough, I got a post beep. That's the beep. When you first turn on your computer, that little short beep that happens, that's post, power on, self-test. And you get a single beep, that's good, right? So now I had no idea what to do. There was no internet at the time. I didn't have any way to look any of this stuff up. So I finally got John's help. And we got Windows 3.1 installed. I had gone to the store, and I want to say it was Sears. I don't know if that could be possible, but I believe it. No, you know what? No, it was not Sears. It was J.C. Penney. J.C. Penney had used to have some computers in there, and you could buy a computer. And they also had some racks for software. Wow, this is like going back in the day. They had some racks for software where you could buy, operating systems and different games and things like that. And I went in there and I found a Windows 3.1 set of discs, and I purchased that. I think it was like $90 at the time. And it was like 16 discs or something crazy. Actually, I guess it was about 6 discs. So later, Windows 95 and Windows 98, those had a lot of discs. So now what? I did not have any internet, and I've got Windows 3.1 installed, but basically nothing else. So I needed a modem. So I purchased a modem. I purchased something like a 14.4K modem, which was definitely way faster than the 300 baud modem, my first modem hooked up to a Commodore 64 back as a kid. Now, you have to understand the internet in these days. The internet was mostly text. There was not all of this graphic stuff that we have today, because the internet was so slow that graphics on a page took a long time to load. So these service providers, AOL and Netscape and all these guys, had very slimmed down websites. I mean, we call them slimmed down by our standard, but that was like, a built up website in their day. I didn't know what else to do. So I ended up creating my own bulletin board system. Why not fall back to the days of my youth and build a BBS? So that's what I did. I had John's help for part of it, but I made my own BBS. I got connected with bulletin board systems, and you could go on and you could post phone numbers and things. So I needed a dedicated phone line. So we got a dedicated phone line, and I had it running. And it was kind of cool. Now I was the sysop. Now I had people calling me to ask for permission to get access and all of that. So it was kind of like going back to my childhood, and it was just kind of fun. But that kind of got boring. So I ended up getting internet connection, and, internet was dial up. So you were tying up your phone line still. And I got Delphi internet, and it was all text. It was horrible. It was a horrible experience. Even at that time, I think it was horrible. 1998, or we'd be in late 1995, maybe 1996 at this point. It was just a horrible experience. And then I finally got Earthlink, and that was cool. That was way better. So you basically had a connection window on your computer, and you hit a button and it would dial up, doot, 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 doot. And then you hear all these sounds in the background, these hissing sounds and everything making that connection. And it was kind of cool. And I got online and got an email address and all of that. So, the BBS part of it was like the Commodore 64 all over again. And now the internet was just something astounding. You had access, man, it's like Chat GPT is right now. We're on the edge of something crazy happening with tech. So the hardware was fun. The software was fun. I was really enjoying this. Delphi was horrible. Earthlink was way better. And next in 1996, my next venture down this path, late 1996, was, hey, I wanted to be like one of those kids taking a laptop to class. I wanted to be able to take notes in class. I already knew how to type. I learned that in high school. And I looked up NEC laptop. So I got like a 40 megahertz, or it might have actually been 66 megahertz NEC laptop. And it was, it was a pretty penny. I think it was probably $800 or $1,000, and it was factory refurbished. So yeah, it was a lot of money for what you were getting, especially in comparison today. But to have a laptop was be honest, it was kind of a status symbol, and I was kind of buying into that. But anyway, so I went from, student, I had about 11 jobs when I was in the Lynchburg area, crazy stuff, all the way from vacuum salesperson to pizza delivery person to security guard to all sorts of stuff all over the map. But one of those businesses that I worked for was Lynchburg Business Machines. And they kind of helped me get started with some copier repair. And it was interesting. I like working with my hands, I like being hands-on. They would bring in these machines, and I would end up having to clean them all up, these copy machines. And I would have to clean them all up. But they were also trying to figure out how to get into serving computers. Like how they knew the computer market was going crazy. People were buying computers like crazy, and they didn't know how to use them. They were trying to figure out ways to get into that market. And I don't think they ended up developing that very far. But I got to go on some calls with one of their techs, and who was a computer guy. And anyway, it just I don't think that kind of took off. But I did want to learn more about computers. So I kept working for Lynchburg Business Machines, but at the same time, I also put an ad in a classified to start doing some of my own consulting. I was through Windows 3.1. I'm trying to get with people that are having challenges with the operating system. I started to know it very well, started to understand all of the settings and how you could really screw up your screen to make it like completely black or completely white, the themes and all of that stuff. You could do some crazy stuff. And so I help people like configure their Windows computers who didn't really know how to use it. Then I found eBay. eBay is awesome. And well, it was awesome back then, especially awesome back then, because you could buy stuff and you could sell it and you could fail miserably as well. You could invest a lot of money in things and that you were going to try and resell, and you could lose your shirt. That would be very easy to do when you're buying things and don't know what to do and don't know how to make them turn around for a profit. So I would buy and sell, and some of those transactions were successful, but some of them failed miserably. At one point, I ended up with, I think it was 10 or 20 286 computers, which I thought I could salvage enough to make a usable computer out of them. But honestly, the tech was moving so fast in those days. These 286s, there's just no way that you could make anything decent out of these when 46s were around. So that failed miserably, and I would spend money on some things. And then I found UBID. UBID was awesome. If any of you remember UBID, when it first came out, you could find some really crazy deals on UBID. And so I started flipping things around. I'd buy them on UBID and I'd sell them on eBay. That was very profitable. We moved back to Maine in 1997. I was desperate for work. We worked at a camp where my wife and I met. We worked there for a summer. And I was desperate to find a job after, and the camp allowed us to stay there and keep helping around the grounds during the winter and help them with promotions and different things like that. But I didn't have regular income. We basically had our lodging taken care of for us, but that was about it. So that first year in Maine, that was a real struggle. In 1998, I heard that East Grand School, a little tiny school in Maine, was hiring. And this was going to be the thing that really was the slingshot for me into the future, the slingshot down the road of my IT path. So I had heard that they were hiring and I didn't know any detail. So I set up an appointment and I walked into the superintendent's office, Mr. Dobbins. I sat across from Mr. Dobbins and he asked me, I was kind of afraid of the guy, I'll be honest with you. When I first started, I was. So he asked me, do you know anything about Windows 3.11, Windows for Workgroups? And I said, well, I know some stuff about Windows 3.1, but I don't know about Windows 3.11. I don't know what's different, but I can learn. And then he asked me, do you know anything about networking, putting in jacks or any of that? I said, no, but I can learn. Do you know anything about frame relays? What on earth is a frame relay? So I said, no, but I can learn. I'm really putting myself out here. I mean, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I'm making commitment to learn some things here that I've got no idea about, but I was confident. So basically the next day I get a phone call. He says, you're hired. So I got hired as a consultant for $16.25 an hour, which was good money back then. It was good money to start in tech and have something like this, a contract that was going to be regular hours, especially for a first timer like me. So one of the first things I had to do was I had to support 46 computers. They were old. They were slow. They were made by a company called Wang. And I think they were green. They might have been gray, but the sun had faded the cases to make them look green. They were ugly. And I had made a commitment to the superintendent that I was going to upgrade these 46 computers. When we come back, you're going to hear how that went. Hey, this is Dana Morrison, host of the IT Path podcast, and I hope you are enjoying this week's episode. Are you interested in getting into IT? Let me ask you one simple question. What is holding you back? IT Path is dedicated to developing a community, content, and courses that will help you get unlocked and stay unlocked on your IT journey. I have more than 25 years experience in IT, and I want to share with you what I've learned and give you the tools to succeed on your very own IT path. Even if you are just starting out on your IT journey, we're here for you. find out more, simply go to itpath.net and sign up for the mailing list, and we will start by sharing some tips, tricks, and tools to help you get going and keep you going. Go to itpath.net and claim your journey. Start your IT path today. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the episode. So now, here I am, 46 Wang computers, 16 megahertz, less than half the speed of the computer I built a few years prior, 4 megabytes of RAM, 100 megabyte hard drives. And I had to figure out how to get these things upgraded. Before we do that, I got to tell you about my first day in IT. It was comical. I'm going in down the hall, and the maintenance guy, Greg, he's taking me to the maintenance office. And Greg was basically taking care of the server, and he had the server in his office on a desk where I was supposed to work. And it was a very small room. The server is sitting on this desk, this tall tower of a server with this little tiny screen, because back then it was like 14, 15-inch screens. If you had a 17-inch screen back then, you were doing pretty good. So this little tiny screen, and it was Windows NT 3.5, Windows NT Server 3.5. And that OS came out in 1994. But Greg is taking me down the hall to where his office is, where this computer is. And he starts kind of like getting kind of giddy. And he's telling me, he says, hey, every once in a while, you're going to come in and the computer's not going to start. And his pitch of his voice is going up and up and up. And he says, and the reason is because the fan is being held on with a rubber band, and every once in a while, the rubber band will dry up and fall off, and the heatsink will fall off the CPU. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness. So guess what? My first fix at the school was like a $16 fan CPU with clips on it to go on. It was funny. So I'm working in this little tiny office next to him, and then they ended up giving me my own office. Now, when schools are looking for space, what they do is they repurpose closets. There's no other way to tell you. They just will they will find space anywhere to put a person. Warm body, need space, closet. So they cleaned out a closet, and they put me in this closet, and that was my office. And it was very small and narrow, but that was my space. So I had this task to upgrade these 46 386 computers with 16 megabytes of RAM, 100. It's hard to think about. It's hard to think about these sizes being so small, right? So 16 megabytes of RAM, 100 megabyte hard drives. And I had a budget of only about $150 each. Now, I was determined. This makes a budget of about $7,000 to do these computers. And my skills, well, I had never rebuilt a computer. I had only built one. And it can't be much different, right? Well, these Wang computers were not necessarily modern cases where they were easy to take the motherboards out and replace them. And I can picture it, the inside of these things and the amount of screws that they had. And I had a struggle to find some good combination of CPU, RAM, motherboard, operating system, everything for $150. And everything needed to be network capable. And this isn't even including the hard drive. So I've really put myself on a limb here, out on a limb, and I start asking the question to myself, oh my goodness, is this even possible? Can I even find a vendor to work with me? So I finally find a vendor, and he offers me 8 megabyte RAM with Pentium 166 processors, which was not too bad for the day, and a motherboard for $140. But still, I needed to find Windows 95. So I found Windows 95. I found 46 licenses for $26 a piece on eBay. Now we're at $166, so we're a little bit over budget. And the superintendent approved it. And then I'm thinking, okay, can I actually install Windows 95? So now I've got this hardware coming and I am nervous because I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what happens if I cannot get all of this stuff working? Can I actually install Windows 95 on these 100 megabyte hard drives? Will the network cards even work with Windows 95? So kick in the hacker mindset. I can do this. I start rethinking. I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. So I received all the hardware, received the operating system. I had one install CD included, one Windows 95 install CD, and I had to get a CD drive. We didn't have any CD drives. And so problem number one, the motherboard doesn't fit. Are you kidding? So I've stripped one of these Wang computers down. I've taken out the motherboard, and luckily the screw holes align, but there's a bracket in the back that does not align. You know, our modern motherboard kits come with a little faceplate. Well, these motherboards had this little faceplate, and normally the faceplate would snap or screw into place, and that bracket did not align. So hack number one, I removed the faceplate on the back of the Wang computer. So basically it was just the ports being exposed in this very small, you know, it's like a 4-inch slot where you'd have to plug in the keyboard and mouse and all that stuff. It wasn't awesome, but it did work. Problem number two, Windows 95 took more than 100 megabytes with the default installation. So I started trying to figure out what can I do to strip this thing down. So I start removing everything from the Windows installation that wasn't needed. There's an internet wizard in Windows 95. I removed that. There was Minesweeper and all that, all of the, there was, I think it was Minesweeper and Solitaire. So I removed those. And finally, I got myself down to a place where I could install at about 80 megabytes. It's crazy to think about an operating system being installed on 80 megabytes. Microsoft Word and Excel. Oh my goodness, this was going to be another challenge. They had purchased licenses for, I think it was, I want to say it was Office 2000. Yes, it was Office 2000 with Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. But my problem was 80 megabytes. So this was a huge issue, but I figured out how to get Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel installed. And those were the two that the business teacher was going to use, Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel. So what I ended up having to do was during this part of the semester or the school year where Sue Lindsay was teaching Microsoft Word, we would have Microsoft Word installed. And then when it was Excel, we'd have Excel installed. But we could not have both installed at the same time. It was just too much. And the students had to save everything to a floppy disk. There was just no way you could save stuff to the hard drive. And, in school and education, students like to play pranks on the teacher, and they would unplug everything from the computer. They would unplug the keyboard and the mouse and the monitor and all sorts of stuff, and they'd switch them around. The computer on the left the keyboard and mouse would go to the computer on the right, and vice versa. So they were just playing pranks on each other. But it was annoying for me because they would call me down to the room, and the computer wouldn't be working because the keyboard and mouse wouldn't work. And then we would find out very quickly that they were simply unplugged. Just a nuisance. So those were my two big problems so far, and I was on my way to keeping my commitment. Problem three, some of the computers had failing power supplies, hard drives, and other issues. So I had to basically it was carnage, computer parts laying all over the place. I took as many parts as I could to make as many working computers as I could. And the good news was I was finally done. The bad news was I didn't make the criteria of 46 computers. I think we got about 40. Nonetheless, the superintendent was ecstatic that we'd done this, that I'd done this, that I'd gone out on a limb and learned how to do this and give them value. So if you go all in, you can do IT. There's no question you can do it. If you are interested and you're like, but I just don't know what step to take. I don't know how to put myself out there. I need to try and figure this out and get started. And you've got questions about where you're at on your own journey. Let us help you. We have some tools to help you figure out what your IT path might look like, or at least where you can start it. So here's some tips. 1, give your best. As you think about your IT journey, figure out how to give your best. Let it just drive from within you. Number 2, you have to be honest with your employer. I've seen a lot of fake resumes out there where people have propped up their knowledge, their skills, and that's not beneficial to the employer, and it's not beneficial to the employee either. So you have to be honest. 3, you've got to find a mentor. You have to work with somebody who's going to work with you. This will help you shorten your IT path. This was like Mr. Dobbins was to me at the very beginning. He put faith in me. He put some trust in me. And I was able to achieve some very hard challenges, overcome some very hard challenges. So 1, give your best. If you don't, everyone will notice. 2, be honest with yourself and with your employer. If you don't, you will be afraid. You will be trying to prop yourself up. And 3, find a mentor. That's going to shorten your path. Now, a couple other things. 4, believe in yourself. You can do it. You have to change your mindset. And 5, you have to be willing to try hard things. So get out there, put yourself out there, start this path. There's no reason why you can't. You need to get unlocked, stay unlocked. You need to claim that IT journey, and we can help you do that at itpath.net. You have been listening to the IT Path podcast. Did you like this episode? Why not subscribe and share with others? IT Path is dedicated to helping you claim your IT journey. You can find out more at itpath.net.